But just as a quick aside, I have some of my own podcasting tools with me right now. So I don't actually have any media training with radio or video or anything like that. But what I've learned, so I've already committed mistake number one, had a cup of coffee, had milk in it. Not a good idea if you're a mouth breather like me, so it really dries out your mouth. Apparently, a solution to that is to bite into an apple beforehand. I've never tried it before. It would make interesting recording, but you can do that. Always make sure I have a water bottle with me, and always make sure I got some sort of lip balm. That dry mouth sound of recording just drives me nuts. That's why I try and eliminate it. And I also have this weird thing that I can't record when I'm wearing my shoes. For some reason, my feet get really hot when I do podcast recordings. It's kind of weird too if you've got a person who's across the room for you and you're presenting, they're wondering what else you're going to take off after that. But those are just a few things about me. So the not-for-profit I run is called Rural Roots to Climate Solutions. We're an Alberta-based project that's all about empowering agriculture producers and their communities, so rural communities all in Alberta, with climate solutions. And you can kind of see our basic communication strategy right there. And I'm going to talk about this a lot today because everybody else who talked just had so much fantastic information on how to deliver a podcast. I guess our contribution is more on how you can deliver a slightly challenging message. So we really focus on these different land management practices and technology, but we focus it through the lens that, you know, this is good for the farms, also good for the climate. And these are stories that come out of Alberta. Unfortunately, most of those stories you hear in relation to climate in Alberta, it's usually bad news, but we're trying to put it out there. There's also some good news stories out there. As I mentioned before, I don't really have a radio or a video background. I got a bit of a mixed bag, so I've been doing climate work for about a decade. I did some journalism for a few years as well. I also do a bit of farming. I didn't grow up on a farm myself. I got into farming about 7 years ago. It turned out I really enjoyed the work. I like being outside, so it was a great combination. The reason why I bring it up is just because it put me in a pretty good position to deliver a podcast like the one we're doing right now. It's helped for the organization as well. But the fact I've had a foot in the climate world and a foot in agriculture, it just really helps with the process. So I guess one big tip I could give you, if you've got skin in the game or if you're part of the community that you're trying to talk to, it's going to make you a more effective storyteller. And it did help as well that I had that journalism background. I moved to Alberta in 2017, so I'm not actually from here, or from Alberta. Grew up in Ontario, and I've been running Rural Roots to Climate Solutions ever since I got here. The project was initially just about doing farm field days, workshops, and a conference where we sent like a dozen speakers to go speak at an organic agriculture conference. But our focus is going to be, okay, you know, there's climate solutions in the agriculture community. There's stuff that farmers can be doing to help us tackle climate change. Let's get it out there. The podcast came about shortly after we created the project. I guess we had a few challenges. First of all, since we're a rural-based organization, the rural Alberta is quite large. We can't be everywhere at once. We're a not-for-profit. We really, we can't have staff in every single town. But one thing that can be in every single town is something like a podcast. And, you know, farmers, even though they don't have a lot of free time, they do spend a heck of a lot of time, like on the tractor, if they're doing seeding or harvest or baling hay. And we had noticed that younger farmers, especially, perhaps they were getting sick of the country music that was playing on the radio and the tractor. They were downloading these podcasts, and quite often these podcasts were focused on agriculture. Just taking that opportunity, you know, you're stuck on a tractor for 10 hours straight. Here's an opportunity to learn. So we decided, okay, well, there's really not any Alberta-specific climate-friendly agriculture podcasts out there. Perhaps this is our opportunity. We can move in there. And that's how we came about it with the podcast idea. And it was thanks to a grant we got from the Alberta Real Estate Foundation. They gave us the seed funding for it. We've got about 36 episodes right now. I think we're over 8,000 downloads right now. Our fan base seems to be all over the place. It is largely concentrated in Alberta, but we do have listeners as far away in like Poland and stuff like that, and a few in the States as well. As for the I guess the contentious message, or one thing, I don't know if anybody actually is from a nonprofit here, but the podcast has turned out to be a really handy way to get like more bang for a buck. Like obviously the grant cycles, just getting grants in general can be quite difficult in this sector, but Our first 10 podcast episodes, all we did was took the video recordings from that initial conference and just turn those in MP3s and turn those into our podcast episodes that way. So not only did we have a presenter at a conference, and then we had a video that went up on YouTube, but then we had a podcast episode out of it. So for nonprofits that are on a really, really tight budget, that's really, really helpful in that sense. As for the messaging, how we talk about it now, I know most people, I know in Edmonton it's a little bit easier to have conversations around climate, but other parts of Alberta can be kind of challenging. Just given, like, you know, a lot of us do have connections to the oil and gas sector. It doesn't matter if it's family or friends, so on and so forth. So with our approach to communicate this difficult message, we use something called a co-benefits communication narrative or strategy. Instead of talking about the direct benefit of implementing a climate solution, which obviously is addressing climate change, we focus on some of the side benefits. And we're really focused on those side benefits that impact the farm. And the best example I can give you, maybe some people have seen Kiss the Ground, you know, soil carbon sequestration, trying to lock carbon in the soil. It's a thing that people talk about now, finally. It's obviously very important for climate change, but it's also very important for agriculture. The more carbon you have in the soil, the healthier soil is going to be. So we really focus on that. So what are the on-farm benefits? And we really, really focus on community and the stories that aren't getting out of that community. So quite often we will, you know, interview those farmers who've been talking about these sustainable management practices for a while, but they don't always get the biggest platform for it. So we give them an opportunity for that. And in fact, a lot of the work we do with our podcast is really just about like holding space so these farmers have a chance to get their stories out there. And I use the exact same strategy that Linda mentioned. So I do send the questions out in advance. I do find it quite amusing that quite a few of these farmers we work with, they're shy individuals, but Jesus, you get them on a podcast talking, they turn into like the best storyteller you can find. It's gold. One thing I do differently when I send them questions, I usually have like a surprise question at the beginning, especially if I know them quite well, if they're like farmers I've worked with in the past. I usually do a surprise question. I don't know if my old boss Brenda's on this call right now, but when I interviewed her before she left to go work for the Alberta Real Estate Foundation, actually, my surprise question for her was, what was the best part about being my boss, right while we're recording? That's a good time where you want to get like a really genuine reaction, but I will admit, like, the quality of the story is going to be a lot better if you can get those questions out there in advance. Quickly try and wrap things up here. From our perspective, as a nonprofit that's really trying to have an impact on the agriculture sector in the province, I just don't underestimate the power of a good story. You can really shift the frame, and if you shift the frame, in our case, we might be able to impact management practices out on the prairies.